Wolfenstein 3D and Doom was successful because of the innovations in both technology and game design. John Romero believed the next game by id Software should continue this trend. Rather than having lots of guns and ammo, Romero's new gameplay revolved around melee combat from the first-person perspective. This was derived from the Dungeons & Dragons campaign that the team played during the creation of their previous games. But, due to time constraints and the disagreement between Romero and everyone else, this idea was abandoned. Instead, the next game they made used the same proven gameplay formula on John Carmack's new engine. Building upon the momentum of Wolfenstein 3D and Doom, id Software released yet another concoction of solid gameplay and advanced technology. Welcome to the first true 3D FPS title. Quake was released in 1996. Slipgate technology is the forefront of scientific research. Once perfected, this would revolutionize transportation as we know it. Unfortunately for everyone, an enemy codenamed Quake is sending death squads through these experimental slipgates, killing, stealing, and creating chaos all over the place. This is Operation Counter-Strike, and you're in charge. Your objective is to find Quake and stop him. Or it. The game starts you off in a hub level. You can choose your difficulty by walking through one of 3 portals. An additional portal is hidden somewhere and grants you access to the Nightmare difficulty if you desire the challenge. Next, you choose one of 4 slipgates to select an episode. You start off with a shotgun, which is the game's equivalent of a pistol. Along the way, you'll pick up additional hardware, which includes nail guns, grenade and rocket launchers, and the Thunderbolt. I always thought it was odd that you had nails for ammunition as opposed to bullets, but it works out in the end. Also, be careful not to use the Thunderbolt underwater for obvious reasons. Quake offered a set of monsters that each presented a challenge to the player. The grunts and enforcers you come across in the military bases are nothing really. The real challenge comes when you cross over to the new dimension. Ogres come equipped with a grenade launcher and a chainsaw. Fiends leap towards you and deal huge amounts of damage if they get too close. Shamblers are hulking beasts with huge claws and a powerful lightning attack. Vors have a homing attack that's difficult to evade, and the not-so-traditional zombies rip off their own flesh and use that as a weapon. These are definitely not stock monsters by any means. To add some flavor to the mix, we also have some power-ups. The Pentagram of Protection is the invulnerability power-up. For 30 seconds, you're immune to everything, and as an added touch, you have 666 armor. The Ring of Shadows makes you invisible, a la Lord of the Rings. You can sneak by the monsters, but honestly, why would you do that? Especially with this power-up, the Quad Damage. As the name implies, you do 4 times the damage with everything, so now you get to see monsters explode. That's what happens when you deal excessive amounts of damage past the 0 health point. They explode into several juicy pieces. These are called gibs. It's a fun way to determine how badly you killed something, though for the zombies, you have to gib them or else they'll just keep coming back to life. The level design for the most part is linear, but the levels contain many places for you to explore. It's possible to end up back on the main path after finding a secret area or portal, and as you progress through the level, you can revisit earlier sections as new paths are opened. The first level of each episode is a military base populated with zombified soldiers and Rottweilers. Finding the slipgate will bring you to that episode's dimension. It's when you get to this point that the level design really begins to show off. There's lots of intricate traps that spring up to surprise the player, and I occasionally got spooked by them. Traps such as this one. Forgetting it's there is just as good as seeing it for the first time. The game does offer a few simple puzzles in the form of multiple switches. Just activate them and either something will happen, or you'll be informed how many more switches to go. Activate all the switches in the sequence to proceed. One thing to note is that some of these items, monsters, and traps are also dependent on the difficulty. On harder difficulties, you may have to do additional exploring to find keys, you might be facing different monsters in certain locations, and you might have a new wall open up. This adds replayability to the game, as it encourages novices to play through the game again on a higher difficulty, just so they can see what the game throws at them. The overall audio in the game was perfect. Simply perfect. To explain this, here's a very brief backstory. Sometime in 1994, the keyboard player for the industrial rock band, 9 Inch Nails, showed the band the shareware copy of Doom. This disrupted their productivity, and they became addicted to it. Trent Reznor, the founder of the band, eventually met the people behind id Software and ultimately did the sound and music for the game. His style of music fits perfectly with the atmosphere of Quake. Not just the music though, the sound effects are powerful. You can hear the nails pinging on the walls, the gears grinding behind secret doors, and the wind blowing in the background. Listen to the zombies. The sound they make is just creepy. Now listen to them blow up. The weapon sounds just make you feel like you have powerful hardware at your disposal. You just want to kill some monsters with them. You pick up the quad damage. This even sounds 4 times as powerful. I can go on and on about the sound and how awesome it is, but you get the idea. As tribute for his work, the 9 Inch Nails logo appears on the nail boxes throughout the game. This may explain why the game uses nails instead of bullets, but the nail guns might have also been planned from the start. The graphics, on the other hand, can be good or bad, depending on what you talk about. The animations of the 3D models are very choppy, not very good by today's standards. After all, it's one of the first true 3D game engines. Its strong points are attributed to the atmosphere and level design. Many levels have a dark and satanic feel to them. Blood on the walls, pentagrams, and crucifixions decorate the levels you explore, and the amount of lighting is just perfect. The monsters don't just ambush you from behind trapdoors, they lurk in the shadows. If it's pitch black, you cannot see them. To show this to the public, their shareware version had the first episode with 8 levels. Surprisingly enough, you had almost all of the weapons. The only weapon missing from the shareware version is the Thunderbolt, so overall, you got a decent amount of content free of charge, and it really showed you what the game was all about. And of course, we won't have an in-depth review until we see how the console ports stack up to the original. 2 ports were made, one for the Nintendo 64 and the other for the Sega Saturn. The Nintendo 64 port removes a selection of levels which, from what I can see, were levels that had a substantial water area. Everything else appears to have been simplified, as is standard with console ports. The cartridge's limited storage space was its biggest problem, which meant huge amounts of compression on the data to make everything fit, and ultimately had very long load times to decompress it all at runtime. Rather than having a hub level for selecting your difficulty in episodes, you select a difficulty from the menu and play through all of the levels sequentially. It also replaces Trent Reznor's soundtrack with some less effective generic ambience. The Sega Saturn port used the Slave Driver engine and had its levels remade from the ground up. It's missing a lot of the sound and atmosphere from the PC, but my biggest problem with this version is the controls. For a game where you really need to aim up and down, the Saturn controller artificially inflates the difficulty to the point where the game starts to become unplayable. Although this has the auto-aiming feature, this does not seem to work as intended. It does have some new secret levels, like the Colosseum, but they're really not worth playing. The ports in general were a horrible representation of the game. The hardware provided was simply not up to the task, and the changes made resulted in a less than adequate experience. So let's go back to the PC version and look at its expansions. There were 2 official expansions for the game, made by 2 different companies. Mission Pack number 1 was called Scourge of Armagon. This expansion was made by Hipnotic Interactive. This has 15 new levels, which adds new enemies like cyborg scorpions and gremlins, and new weapons like the proxy mine launcher and the legendary Mjolnir. The expansion feels like it simply extends the single-player game, and really doesn't offer any new gameplay like a typical expansion would. Nonetheless, it's worth a playthrough. Mission Pack number 2 was called Dissolution of Eternity. This one was made by Rogue Entertainment, and features new ammo types and enemies in 16 new levels. New enemies include phantom swordsmen, mummies, and statues of enemies that come to life. The new ammo types give extra power to existing weapons. There's lava nails for the nail guns, and cluster rockets for the grenade and rocket launchers. The levels do offer some new scenery, but again, it simply extends the single-player game, though I would favor this slightly over the first mission pack. With the amount of content commercially available for the game, you'll have hours of fun and loads of challenges to overcome. What I like most about Quake is its perfect blend of action and horror. This was a straight-up action game with a few startling moments here and there when you least expect them. The level design does most of the work, with the audio and dark environments being the icing on the cake. id Software has done a very good job with this game. It doesn't just challenge you as a player, but the game itself gets into your head. Though, in retrospect, the best part about Quake was never paid for.